Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker will give his annual State of the State address tonight.
For the third year in a row, he's expected to propose tax cuts. Walker is set to introduce $500 million in tax cuts thanks to his state budget surplus that's higher than expected. Those tax cuts include a plan to lower property taxes by about $100 for a typical house. Wisconsin often lands in the country's top 10 states with the highest property taxes, and Democrats know the cuts are popular, but they're suggesting other ways to spend the surplus.
When looking at surplus, I would first of all keep middle-class Wisconsinites in mind. They are struggling and need, I think, more support in achieving long-term economic stability and success.
The Democrats suggest the surplus could be used to better fund public education and job creation.
Well, joining us now with more on the speech is UWL political science professor Joe Heim. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Lisa.
The gubernatorial election is in November. Of course, there's also been word, some thoughts that Governor Walker might run for president. Tonight's State of the State, how much of this has to do with the state? How much of this is him launching a campaign?
Well, there's probably a little bit of both. This is the this is the speech that most people will be watching, and this is the speech that leads into his re-election. Before he starts running for president, he's got to win re-election first. So there's a little in there. The national part of it really has to do with property tax and tax relief in general. It's a major mantra of the Republican Party to cut taxes, so it's good for the Wisconsin Republicans and it's good for national Republicans.
Now, not much legislation is expected to be passed in 2014. What's that all about?
Well, this is the budget, which was passed more than a year ago, is far and away the biggest thing that the state has to deal with in the legislature. They'll be passing smaller pieces of legislation, things that don't cost a lot of money, mostly to do with regulations, some social agenda issues, basically. But my understanding is that they're going to be out of session come March. The re-election, essentially, the season starts a lot earlier this year because of the primary now in mid-August.
Now, this is Governor Walker's fourth State of the State. When comparing it to his first State of the State, at that time, and he campaigned on this too, he wanted to create 250,000 more private sector jobs. That number, the latest number, is about 105,000 jobs that have been created, private sector jobs. Do you expect him to talk about that at all tonight?
I expect him to talk about job growth, but not necessarily statistics. He's not going to remind people of that. That's up to the Democrats to remind people of the 250,000, but it's pretty clear he's not going to get to that. So what he will do is talk about other statistics that are more favorable, growth in the economy, essentially reduction in the unemployment, statistics going down basically, and he might pick out some specific anecdotal issues where jobs have been created in the state. But I really think he'll stay away from that 250,000 because that's not considered good news.
Yeah. Also, education. We saw major changes in education in the state of Wisconsin. In his first State of the State, education wasn't even mentioned, and yet we've seen millions of dollars in cuts to public education. We've seen an expansion on school vouchers. We've seen weakening teachers' unions. Do you expect Governor Walker to talk at all about the changes in education tonight?
Well, if I'm counting up the dollars correctly, there's perhaps as much as a couple $100 million that are unaccounted for of the surplus, the $900 million surplus. So it's possible he may be allocating a certain amount of that to specific things such as education. The delivery of the property tax proposal actually goes through the property tax that goes to the tech schools. So essentially that's education in some respects.
Now, I've heard that some expect him to talk about tax cuts tonight. What would be the focus with tax cuts? What is he going to kind of press on?
Well, I think he'll talk about property taxes being cut basically, and they'll talk a little bit about income tax changes. What he's proposing apparently is a change in the lowest bracket from 4.4% down to 4.0%. This will give virtually everybody who earns an income in Wisconsin some tax relief. But we're talking about $44 to $64 per year.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
We appreciate it. Now, the speech starts at 7 o'clock tonight and is being broadcast on Wisconsin Public Television. We will have a link to the speech on our website at news8000.com. We will also have recap and reaction on the speech on News 8 at 10 o'clock.